The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of Valenhall, the kingdom's capital city.
Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow as he crouched behind a stack of wooden crates in the marketplace. His heart pounded against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. 3 weeks had passed since he escaped from the royal dungeons, and every day brought new dangers. The smell of fresh bread and roasted meat filled the air, making his empty stomach growl with hunger. He had not eaten a proper meal in days. His clothes, once fine fabric befitting a merchant's son, now hung in tatters. Dirt and grime covered his face, making him look like any other beggar on the streets. This disguise had kept him alive, but it would not last forever. Marcus closed his eyes and remembered the day his life changed forever. He had been walking through his father's warehouse when he overheard two men talking in hushed voices. They wore the royal colors, but something about their conversation made him stop and listen. What he heard that night would haunt him forever. "The king must never know about the missing gold," one man had said. "If he discovers we have been stealing from the royal treasury, we will all hang." The other man nodded grimly. "Sir Roderick has promised us protection as long as we keep quiet. The blame must fall on someone else." Marcus had gasped, unable to believe what he was hearing. Sir Roderick was the king's most trusted advisor, a man known throughout the kingdom for his honor and loyalty. How could he be involved in stealing from the crown? The sound of his surprise had echoed through the warehouse, and the two men had turned to see him standing in the shadows. "Who goes there?" one of them had shouted, drawing his sword. Marcus had run that night, faster than he had ever run in his life. But it was too late. By morning, the royal guards had surrounded his family's home. They carried a warrant signed by Sir Roderick himself, accusing Marcus of theft and treason. His father had begged for mercy, his mother had wept, but the guards showed no compassion. "Your son has betrayed the crown," the captain had declared. "He must face justice." Marcus had been dragged to the royal dungeons, where he spent 2 months in a cell barely large enough for a dog. The walls were damp and cold, and rats scurried across the floor at night. He was given 1 meal a day, usually nothing more than stale bread and dirty water. The guards took pleasure in reminding him that he would soon hang for his crimes. But Marcus knew the truth. He was not a thief or a traitor. He was simply a witness to corruption at the highest levels of the kingdom. Sir Roderick had framed him to protect his own guilty secrets, and now Marcus was paying the price for another man's greed. The escape had come by pure chance. A new guard, young and inexperienced, had forgotten to lock his cell door properly one night. Marcus had waited until the guard fell asleep, then slipped out into the corridor. The castle was like a maze, with passages that seemed to lead nowhere and stairs that spiraled into darkness. But luck was on his side that night, and he found a window that led to the castle walls. Climbing down the stone walls had been terrifying. One wrong move would have meant death on the rocks below. But the thought of hanging for crimes he did not commit gave him strength. He had dropped into the moat surrounding the castle, the cold water shocking his body back to full awareness. Swimming to shore had taken all his remaining energy, but freedom had never tasted so sweet. Now, 3 weeks later, Marcus found himself hiding in the very heart of the kingdom. The marketplace was dangerous, but it was also the perfect place to blend in with the crowd. Merchants, farmers, and common folk filled the streets, their voices creating a constant buzz of conversation. Royal guards patrolled the area regularly, but they were looking for a well-dressed merchant's son, not a dirty beggar in rags. Marcus watched as a group of children played near the fountain in the center of the square. Their laughter reminded him of his younger sister, Elena. She was only 12 years old when he was arrested, and he wondered if she still remembered him. Did she believe the lies about his guilt, or did she know in her heart that her brother was innocent? The sound of marching feet made him look up. A patrol of royal guards was approaching, their armor gleaming in the sunlight. Marcus pressed himself deeper into the shadows behind the crates, holding his breath as they passed by. The leader of the patrol was a man Marcus recognized all too well. Captain Garrett was Sir Roderick's personal enforcer, a man known for his cruelty and lack of mercy. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with scars that told the story of many battles. His eyes were cold and gray, like winter storms, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had never been questioned. "Search every corner," Captain Garrett commanded his men.
"The fugitive is here somewhere. I can feel it." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. How did the captain know he was in the marketplace? Had someone seen him and reported his location?
He looked around desperately for another hiding place, but the guards were spreading out in all directions. "You there," Captain Garrett called to a merchant selling vegetables.
"Have you seen anything suspicious today?"
The merchant shook his head quickly.
"No, sir. Nothing at all."
Marcus knew he had to move. Staying hidden behind the crates would only work for so long. He waited until the guards were distracted by questioning other merchants, then began to crawl along the ground toward a narrow alley between two buildings. He was halfway there when disaster struck. A small child, no more than 5 years old, spotted him moving through the shadows. The boy pointed and shouted with excitement.
"Look! There's a man hiding behind the boxes."
Captain Garrett spun around instantly, his hand moving to his sword.
"Where?" he demanded.
The child pointed directly at Marcus, who knew his hiding place was discovered. He had two choices: surrender and face certain death, or run and hope to escape once again.
The decision was easy.
Marcus jumped to his feet and sprinted toward the alley. Behind him, he heard Captain Garrett shouting orders to his men.
"There! Stop him! Do not let the traitor escape!"
The sound of armored feet pounding against cobblestones filled the air as the guards gave chase. Marcus ran with everything he had, his lungs burning with each breath. The alley was narrow and dark, filled with garbage and puddles of dirty water. He leaped over obstacles and ducked under hanging laundry, the guards close behind him. The alley opened onto another street, this one less crowded than the marketplace. Marcus looked left and right, trying to decide which way to run. To his left was the wealthy district, where large houses stood behind iron gates. To his right was the poor quarter, where buildings crowded together like broken teeth. He chose the poor quarter, thinking the narrow streets would make it harder for the guards to follow. But, as he ran, he realized he had made a mistake. The streets here were like a spider's web, twisting and turning in all directions. It would be easy to get lost, and if he took a wrong turn, he might find himself trapped in a dead end. Behind him, Captain Garrett was gaining ground. The man was older than Marcus, but years of training had made him strong and fast. His armor should have slowed him down, but he moved with the grace of a natural warrior.
"You cannot run forever, boy," the captain shouted. "Face your punishment like a man."
Marcus turned a corner and found himself in a small courtyard surrounded by tall buildings. There was only one way out, and Captain Garrett was blocking it. The other guards had spread out to cover any possible escape routes.
Marcus was trapped.
He pressed his back against the stone wall, breathing heavily. His legs felt like water, and his heart was beating so fast he thought it might burst. Captain Garrett walked slowly into the courtyard, his sword drawn and ready. 3 weeks you have run from justice, the captain said, his voice calm and cold. 3 weeks you have made fools of the king's guards.
That ends today.
Marcus looked around desperately for any way to escape, but the walls were too high to climb, and the guards blocked every exit. He was going to die here, in this dirty courtyard, far from his family and friends. But then, something inside him changed. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was the injustice of his situation, but Marcus felt anger rising in his chest like fire.
He had done nothing wrong.
He was innocent of all charges. If he was going to die, he would not go quietly. "I am not a traitor," he said, standing up straight despite his exhaustion.
"I have stolen nothing from the crown."
Captain Garrett laughed, but there was no humor in the sound.
"The evidence says otherwise.
Sir Roderick himself has signed the warrant for your arrest."
"Sir Roderick is a liar and a thief,"
Marcus shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "He is the one who stole from the royal treasury. He framed me to hide his own crimes." The captain's eyes narrowed dangerously.
"You dare accuse the king's most trusted advisor of theft?" Your lies only make your guilt more obvious. They are not lies.
Marcus stepped forward, his fear forgotten in the face of injustice. I heard him plotting with his men.
I know the truth.
For a moment, something flickered in Captain Garrett's eyes. It was gone so quickly that Marcus might have imagined it, but, for just an instant, the captain had looked uncertain.
Even if that were true, Captain Garrett said slowly, you have no proof. Your word means nothing against his.
Then, let me speak to the king, Marcus demanded.
Let me tell him what I know.
The captain shook his head. The king does not waste his time listening to the lies of condemned criminals. You will hang at dawn, as the law demands.
Marcus felt his last hope slipping away.
Without proof of Sir Roderick's guilt, his words were meaningless.
But he could not give up.
Not when the truth was so important.
What if I could prove it? He asked desperately. What if I could show you evidence of Sir Roderick's crimes?
Captain Garrett paused, his sword still pointed at Marcus's chest.
What evidence?
The stolen gold, Marcus said, thinking quickly. I know where Sir Roderick has hidden it.
If I can show you, will you listen to what I have to say?
The captain was quiet for a long moment. The other guards looked at him expectantly, waiting for orders.
Finally, he spoke. You have 5 minutes to convince me. If you cannot, you will hang today instead of tomorrow.
Marcus nodded, knowing this was his only chance. He had lied about knowing where the gold was hidden, but maybe he could use those 5 minutes to plant doubt in the captain's mind. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to prove his innocence. Sir Roderick has been stealing from the royal treasury for months, Marcus began, his voice steady despite his fear.
He uses his position to access the vaults, then blames the missing gold on others.
My father's warehouse was used to store some of the stolen treasure before it was moved to a more permanent hiding place.
Where is this hiding place? Captain Garrett demanded.
Marcus's mind raced. He needed to buy time, to think of something that would convince the captain to investigate further.
It moves, he said finally. Sir Roderick is too smart to keep it in one location.
But I know his pattern, his method.
Give me a chance to show you.
The captain studied Marcus's face carefully, looking for signs of deception. Why should I trust you?
You are already condemned to die. You would say anything to save your life.
Because I am the only one who knows the truth, Marcus replied.
And, because deep down, you know something is wrong.
You have served the crown faithfully for years.
You know the difference between a real criminal and an innocent man. Captain Garrett's expression was unreadable.
The seconds ticked by like hours as he considered Marcus's words. Finally, he lowered his sword slightly.
You have until sunset, he said quietly. If you cannot prove your claims by then, I will personally see that you hang. Do you understand? Marcus nodded, relief flooding through his body.
He had bought himself a few more hours of life.
Now he had to find a way to make them count.
Somehow, he had to expose Sir Roderick's crimes and clear his own name. The task seemed impossible, but it was his only hope. As Captain Garrett gestured for his men to surround Marcus, the young fugitive looked up at the sky. The sun was already past its peak, beginning its slow journey toward the western horizon. Time was running out, but, for the first time in weeks, Marcus felt something other than despair.
He felt determination.
The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Captain Garrett marched Marcus through the winding streets of Valenhall. 6 guards surrounded them, their hands never straying far from their weapons. Marcus's wrists were bound with thick rope that cut into his skin with every step, but he barely noticed the pain. His mind was focused entirely on the impossible task ahead of him. He had to prove Sir Roderick's guilt before sunset, but he had no evidence and no allies. Worse still, he had lied about knowing where the stolen gold was hidden. Captain Garrett expected to be led to proof that did not exist. When the captain discovered the deception, Marcus's death would be swift and certain. As they walked, Marcus studied the faces of the people they passed. Merchants closed their shops and hurried inside when they saw the patrol approaching. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts, whispering about the prisoner in chains.
Everyone knew that being escorted by Captain Garrett meant only one thing: someone was about to die. "Where are we going?"
Captain Garrett asked, his voice cutting through Marcus's thoughts.
Marcus had to think quickly. He needed to buy time while he figured out a real plan.
"The old district," he said, trying to sound confident. "Near the abandoned mill by the river."
It was a lie, but Marcus remembered hearing stories about the old mill. It had been closed for years after a fire, and people said it was haunted. If he could get Captain Garrett to search the mill, it might give him time to think of something else. Captain Garrett nodded grimly and changed direction, leading the group toward the older part of the city. The buildings here were different from the bustling marketplace they had left behind. Many were empty, their windows boarded up and their walls covered in moss. The streets were narrower and darker, filled with shadows even in the bright afternoon light. As they walked, Marcus found himself thinking about his family. His father, Thomas, was a good man who had built his merchant business through honest work and fair dealing. His mother, Sarah, was known throughout their neighborhood for her kindness and generous spirit. And Elena, his little sister, was the brightest star in his world. She loved stories and dreams of adventure, always begging Marcus to tell her tales of brave knights and daring rescues. What would Elena think if she could see him now? Would she still believe in heroes and happy endings, or had his arrest destroyed her faith in justice? The thought of his sister losing hope because of his situation made Marcus's chest tight with emotion. "Tell me about this evidence you claim to have," Captain Garrett said suddenly. "What exactly did you see that night?" Marcus took a deep breath, knowing this might be his chance to plant seeds of doubt in the captain's mind. "I was working late in my father's warehouse when I heard voices. Two men were discussing how to hide their theft from the king. They mentioned Sir Roderick by name, saying he had promised them protection if they kept quiet." "What did they look like?" one of the guards asked. Marcus described the two men as best he could remember. One was tall and thin, with a scar across his left cheek. The other was shorter and heavier, with a beard that was more gray than black. They both wore the royal colors, but their manner was secretive and nervous. Captain Garrett was quiet for a moment. Marcus watched his face carefully, looking for any sign that his words were having an effect. The captain's expression remained stern, but Marcus thought he detected a flicker of something in the man's eyes. Concern? Suspicion? It was impossible to tell. "Even if such men exist," Captain Garrett said finally, "their word would mean more than yours. You are a convicted criminal. They are soldiers of the crown. But what if they could be made to confess?" Marcus asked desperately. "What if you could catch them in their lies?" The captain stopped walking and turned to face Marcus directly. "What are you suggesting?" Marcus's heart raced as he realized he might have found a way forward. "Those men are still in Sir Roderick's service. If you could question them without warning, without giving them time to prepare their stories, they might reveal the truth." "You want me to accuse loyal soldiers based on the word of a fugitive?" Captain Garrett's voice was cold and dangerous. "I want you to ask questions," Marcus replied carefully. "Nothing more. If they are innocent, they will have nothing to hide. But if they are guilty, the truth will show in their faces." One of the guards laughed harshly. "The boy thinks he can manipulate us with clever words. Should we listen to his games, Captain?" Captain Garrett raised his hand for silence. He studied Marcus's face for a long moment, his gray eyes revealing nothing. "You are either very brave or very foolish," he said at last. "Perhaps both." They had reached the old mill by the river. The building stood like a broken giant against the sky, its wooden walls blackened by the long-ago fire. The wheel that had once turned in the flowing water was now still and covered with rust. Weeds grew through cracks in the stone foundation, and the air smelled of decay and abandonment. "Show me," Captain Garrett commanded, gesturing toward the mill. Marcus's stomach dropped. He had hoped to avoid this moment, but there was no escape now. He had to go through with his deception and hope that somehow, something would happen to save him. They entered the mill through a door that hung crooked on its hinges.
Inside, the air was thick with dust and shadows. Sunlight filtered through holes in the roof, creating patterns of light and dark across the floor. The machinery that had once ground grain into flour was now nothing more than rusted metal and rotting wood.
"Where is the gold?"
Captain Garrett asked, his patience clearly running thin. Marcus walked slowly around the main floor, pretending to search for signs of the treasure he knew was not there. His mind raced desperately, trying to think of any way to turn this situation to his advantage.
"It was moved," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper.
Sir Roderick must have suspected someone was getting close to the truth.
Captain Garrett's face darkened with anger. "You have wasted my time with lies," he roared. "Guards, prepare the rope. This deceiver will hang here and, now." "Wait!" Marcus shouted, backing away from the advancing guards.
"I can still prove his guilt.
The men I overheard, they know everything. Question them, and you will see I speak the truth." "Enough!" Captain Garrett drew his sword, its blade gleaming in the dusty air.
"I should have ended this farce in the courtyard.
Your lies have cost you any mercy you might have received."
Marcus found himself pressed against the far wall of the mill, with nowhere left to run. The guards formed a semicircle around him, their weapons drawn. This was the end. He had failed to prove his innocence, and now he would die without ever seeing his family again. But, as Captain Garrett raised his sword for the killing blow, something unexpected happened. The sound of horses' hooves echoed from outside the mill, growing louder with each passing second. The captain paused, listening carefully.
"Captain Garrett," a voice called from outside. "Are you in there, sir?"
"Here," the captain replied, lowering his sword slightly.
"What news do you bring?"
A young soldier entered the mill, his face flushed from hard riding. "Sir Roderick requests your immediate return to the castle, Captain."
There has been a development in the investigation. Marcus felt a spark of hope.
Perhaps something had happened to change his situation.
Perhaps the truth was finally coming to light. What kind of development? Captain Garrett demanded.
The messenger glanced nervously at Marcus before speaking.
"I am not privy to the details, sir. I was told only that your presence is required urgently." Captain Garrett stood silent for a moment, weighing his options.
Marcus held his breath, knowing that the next few seconds would determine whether he lived or died.
"Very well," the captain said finally. "We will return to the castle. But this prisoner comes with us.
Sir Roderick may want to question him personally before his execution."
Relief flooded through Marcus's body. He had been granted another reprieve, though he did not know why.
As the guards surrounded him once again, he tried to catch the messenger's eye, hoping to learn more about this mysterious development. But the young soldier avoided his gaze, his expression troubled and uncertain. The journey back to the castle took nearly an hour. Marcus's mind was filled with questions and possibilities.
What had happened to make Sir Roderick summon Captain Garrett so urgently? Had someone else discovered evidence of the advisor's corruption? Or was this simply another trap, designed to give Marcus false hope before crushing it forever?
The castle of Valenhall rose before them like a mountain of stone and steel.
Its towers reached toward the clouds, and its walls were thick enough to withstand any siege.
Marcus had escaped from this fortress once, but he knew there would be no second escape. Whatever happened next would determine his fate once and for all. As they approached the main gate, Marcus noticed something unusual. There were more guards than normal, and they seemed nervous and agitated. Whispered conversations stopped when Captain Garrett's patrol came into view, and several soldiers hurried away as if they had urgent business elsewhere.
"Something is wrong," one of the guards muttered to his companion. "The whole castle is in uproar."
"Silence," Captain Garrett commanded, but Marcus could see that the captain was also troubled by the atmosphere of tension and uncertainty. They were escorted through the castle's main courtyard, where Marcus was surprised to see a crowd of courtiers and nobles gathered in small groups. Their faces were grave and worried, and their conversations were conducted in hushed tones that spoke of serious news. Lady Catherine, wife of the king's brother, stood near the main entrance with several other noble ladies. She was known for her beauty and grace, but today her face was pale with worry. When she saw Captain Garrett approaching with his prisoner, she stepped forward.
"Captain," she said urgently, "have you heard the news?" "What news, my lady?" Captain Garrett replied, stopping his patrol.
Lady Catherine glanced at Marcus, then leaned closer to speak quietly. "It concerns Sir Roderick. The king has ordered his immediate arrest." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat.
Could it be true? Had Sir Roderick finally been exposed for the criminal he was? Captain Garrett's face showed his shock. "On what charges, my lady?"
"Theft from the royal treasury," Lady Catherine whispered. "And conspiracy against the crown." The world seemed to spin around Marcus as the implications of this news sank in. If Sir Roderick had been arrested for the very crimes Marcus had been accused of, it meant that someone else had discovered the truth. It meant that Marcus might actually be innocent in the eyes of the law. But, even as hope began to bloom in his chest, Marcus knew he was not safe yet. Sir Roderick was a clever and dangerous man who would not go down without a fight. And there were still many people in the castle who believed Marcus was guilty of treason.
"Where is Sir Roderick now?" Captain Garrett asked.
"In the king's private chambers," Lady Catherine replied.
"His Majesty is questioning him personally."
Captain Garrett turned to look at Marcus, his expression unreadable. For the first time since their encounter in the marketplace, the captain seemed uncertain about what to do next. "Sir," one of the guards said quietly, "what are your orders regarding the prisoner?"
Captain Garrett was silent for a long moment.
Marcus could see the man's mind working, trying to process this unexpected turn of events. Everything the captain thought he knew about the case had suddenly been thrown into question. "We will wait," Captain Garrett said finally.
"Until the king has finished his questioning of Sir Roderick, we will hold the prisoner in the castle dungeon. But no harm is to come to him until we know the full truth."
As they led him toward the dungeon, Marcus felt a mixture of hope and fear unlike anything he had ever experienced. He was still a prisoner, still accused of terrible crimes, but, for the first time in months, there was a real possibility that justice might prevail. The dungeon was exactly as he remembered it, dark, cold, and filled with the smell of dampness and despair. But, as the heavy door closed behind him, Marcus did not feel the crushing hopelessness he had experienced during his first imprisonment. Instead, he felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel. He felt hope. Outside his cell, he could hear the guards talking in low voices about the shocking news of Sir Roderick's arrest. Some seemed pleased that corruption had been discovered at such high levels of government. Others worried about what other secrets might come to light. Marcus sat on the cold stone floor and closed his eyes, allowing himself to imagine what it would be like to see his family again. To hold his little sister and tell her stories of adventure and heroism. To help his father rebuild their reputation and their business. To live as a free man, with his name cleared and his honor restored. But he also knew that the battle was far from over. Sir Roderick was a master manipulator who had fooled the king and the entire court for months or even years. The man would not confess to his crimes easily, and he might still find a way to escape justice. As the hours passed, Marcus listened carefully to every sound from the corridor outside his cell. Footsteps echoed on the stone floors as guards and messengers hurried back and forth. Voices carried fragments of conversation about arrests and investigations and royal anger. And, somewhere in the castle above, the king was learning the truth about one of his most trusted advisors. The truth that Marcus had tried so desperately to tell, and that had nearly cost him his life. The sun was setting beyond the small window high in his cell wall when Marcus finally heard the sound he had been waiting for. Heavy footsteps approached his door, accompanied by the jingle of keys and armor. Captain Garrett appeared in the doorway, his face grave but no longer hostile. Behind him stood two guards, but their weapons remained sheathed. "The king wishes to see you," Captain Garrett said simply. Marcus rose to his feet, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. This was the moment he had dreamed of for so long. The chance to tell his story to the one person who had the power to set him free. But, as he followed Captain Garrett through the corridors of the castle, Marcus could not shake the feeling that his greatest challenges still lay ahead. The throne room of Valenhall Castle had never seemed more magnificent or terrifying to Marcus as he was escorted through its massive oak doors. Towering columns of marble reached toward a ceiling painted with scenes of ancient battles and divine blessing. Tapestries depicting the kingdom's glorious history hung from the walls, their rich colors glowing in the light of dozens of crystal chandeliers. At the far end of the vast chamber sat King Aldrich on his golden throne, his presence commanding even from a distance. The king was a man of middle years, with silver threading through his dark hair and lines of wisdom and worry etched into his strong face. He wore the crown of Valenhall, a masterpiece of gold and precious gems that had been passed down through 15 generations of rulers.
Captain Garrett led Marcus down the long carpet that stretched from the entrance to the throne.
Their footsteps echoed in the silence, the only sound in a room that could hold hundreds of people. Today, however, the throne room was nearly empty. Only a few of the king's most trusted advisors stood near the throne, their faces grave with the weight of recent revelations. As they drew closer, Marcus could see the king's eyes studying him with intense curiosity. King Aldrich was known throughout the kingdom as a fair and just ruler, but he was also a man who did not suffer fools or traitors. Marcus knew that the next few minutes would determine not only his freedom but possibly his life. 20 feet from the throne, Captain Garrett stopped and knelt on one knee. "Your Majesty," he said formally, "I present the prisoner Marcus Thornfield, as you commanded." "Rise, Captain," the king said, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. Then, he turned his attention to Marcus. "You may approach." Marcus walked forward on unsteady legs until he stood directly before the throne. The king's presence was overwhelming, and Marcus found it difficult to meet his gaze directly. But he forced himself to stand straight and look into the eyes of the most powerful man in the kingdom. "3 months ago," King Aldrich began, his voice measured and careful, "you were arrested for theft from the royal treasury and conspiracy against the crown. You were tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. Yet today, I find myself questioning everything about your case. Tell me, Marcus Thornfield, do you maintain your innocence?" "I do, Your Majesty," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have never stolen anything from the crown, nor have I ever conspired against your rule." The king leaned forward slightly in his throne. "Then, explain to me how gold bearing the royal seal came to be found in your family's warehouse." Marcus felt his heart sink. This was the evidence that had condemned him, and he still had no good explanation for it. "I do not know, Your Majesty. I had never seen that gold before the guards found it. Someone must have placed it there without my knowledge." "Someone," the king repeated, his tone skeptical. "And who might this someone be?" Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would either save him or seal his doom. "Sir Roderick, Your Majesty. I believe he placed the gold there to frame me for his own crimes." A murmur went through the small group of advisors near the throne. One of them, an elderly man with a white beard, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," the man said, "this is the same wild accusation the prisoner made before his trial. There was no evidence to support his claims then, and there is none now." King Aldrich held up his hand for silence. "Lord Reginald speaks truly. Your accusations against Sir Roderick were investigated thoroughly during your trial. No evidence was found to support them." The king paused, studying Marcus carefully. "However, circumstances have changed significantly since then." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. "Your Majesty, I heard Sir Roderick's men discussing their crimes. They spoke of stealing from the treasury and of framing innocent people to hide their guilt." "Describe these men," the king commanded. Marcus gave the same description he had provided to Captain Garrett earlier. As he spoke, he noticed one of the advisors shift uncomfortably. The man was tall and thin, with a scar across his left cheek. Marcus's eyes widened as he recognized him as one of the men from the warehouse. The king noticed Marcus's reaction immediately. "You recognize someone, do you not?" Marcus pointed at the tall advisor. "That man, Your Majesty. He was one of the 2 I heard talking about the theft." The tall man's face went pale. "Your Majesty, this is preposterous. I have served the crown faithfully for 10 years. Have you indeed, Sir Edmund? The king asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Then, perhaps you can explain why your name appears on several documents that were found in Sir Roderick's private chambers this morning. Sir Edmund's composure cracked completely. He glanced around the room like a trapped animal, looking for an escape that did not exist. I don't know what documents you mean, Your Majesty. King Aldrich gestured to one of his guards, who brought forward a wooden chest. The king opened it and pulled out several pieces of parchment. These documents detail payments made from the royal treasury to various individuals. Your name appears frequently, Sir Edmund, along with amounts that far exceed your official salary. The evidence was overwhelming, and Sir Edmund knew it. His shoulders sagged in defeat, and his voice became barely audible. Your Majesty, I can explain. I am listening, the king said coldly. Sir Edmund looked around the room one more time, then fell to his knees. It started small, Your Majesty. Sir Roderick approached me last year with an offer. He said the treasury contained more gold than the kingdom needed, and that a small portion could be used to reward loyal servants of the crown. Theft, the king corrected. You are describing theft. Sir Roderick called it a bonus system, Sir Edmund continued desperately. He said it was approved by the royal council, but had to be kept secret to avoid jealousy among other courtiers. Marcus felt vindicated as the truth finally came to light. Everything he had tried to tell people for months was being confirmed by the very man who had participated in the crimes. And what role did you play in framing Marcus Thornfield? The king asked. Sir Edmund's voice became even quieter. Sir Roderick said we needed a scapegoat, someone to blame when the missing gold was discovered. He chose the Thornfield family because their warehouse was perfect for planting evidence. So you placed stolen gold in an innocent man's business, knowing he would be arrested and executed for your crimes? The king's anger was beginning to show in his voice. I never wanted anyone to die. Sir Edmund protested. Sir Roderick said the boy would be exiled, nothing more. Sir Roderick lied to you, just as he lied to the crown, King Aldrich said. Marcus Thornfield was sentenced to hang for your crimes. The weight of his guilt seemed to crush Sir Edmund completely. He collapsed forward, his forehead touching the floor. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I was weak and foolish. I believed Sir Roderick's lies because I wanted to believe them. King Aldrich looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed anger, sadness, and regret. It appears, young man, that you have been gravely wronged by those who were sworn to serve justice. Marcus felt tears beginning to form in his eyes, but he forced himself to remain composed. Your Majesty, I ask only that my name be cleared and my family's honor restored. That will be done, the king promised. But, first, I must know everything. Sir Roderick has not yet confessed to his crimes, though the evidence against him continues to grow. Tell me exactly what you overheard that night in the warehouse. Marcus recounted the conversation in as much detail as he could remember. He described how the two men had discussed moving stolen gold and how they had mentioned Sir Roderick's promise of protection. As he spoke, Sir Edmund nodded miserably, confirming every detail. Where is the rest of the stolen gold? The king asked Sir Edmund. Sir Roderick moved it frequently, Sir Edmund replied. I know of at least 3 different locations where it was stored at various times. The king turned to one of his guards. Find these locations immediately. I want every piece of stolen gold recovered and returned to the royal treasury. Yes, Your Majesty, the guard replied, hurrying from the throne room. King Aldrich then addressed Captain Garrett. Captain, you have served the crown with honor for many years. What is your assessment of this situation? Captain Garrett stepped forward and bowed deeply. Your Majesty, I believe the evidence clearly shows that Marcus Thornfield is innocent of all charges. He has been the victim of a conspiracy designed to hide the true criminals. And what of Sir Roderick? The king asked. He must face trial for his crimes, Your Majesty. Theft from the royal treasury, conspiracy against the crown, and the framing of an innocent man are all capital offenses. The king nodded grimly. Indeed they are.
Sir Roderick's trial will begin tomorrow, and justice will be swift.
Marcus felt overwhelmed by the rapid turn of events. After months of despair and hopelessness, his innocence was finally being recognized. But he also felt a deep sadness for the pain his family had endured during his imprisonment and exile.
Your Majesty, Marcus said carefully, may I ask about my family? Have they been harmed because of the charges against me? The king's expression softened slightly. Your family has indeed suffered greatly. Your father's business was ruined by association with your supposed crimes. Your mother has been shunned by many in the community. And your sister. The king paused, seeming reluctant to continue. What about Elena? Marcus asked urgently. Your sister has been ill, the king said gently. The stress and worry have taken a toll on her health. She has been asking for you constantly, refusing to believe that you were guilty of the crimes charged against you. Marcus felt his heart breaking. Elena, his bright and cheerful little sister, was suffering because of Sir Roderick's lies. The thought of her pain was almost more than he could bear. I must see her, Marcus said desperately. Please, Your Majesty, may I go to my family? King Aldrich considered this request carefully. You are still officially a prisoner until I issue a royal pardon. However, given the circumstances, I believe a brief visit can be arranged under guard. Relief flooded through Marcus's body. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you for believing the truth. Do not thank me yet, the king said seriously. Much damage has been done that cannot be easily undone. Your family's reputation, your father's business, your sister's health, these things will take time to heal. I understand, Your Majesty. But, now that the truth is known, we can begin to rebuild. The king nodded slowly. Captain Garrett will escort you to your family home. You will have 2 hours with them before returning to the castle. Tomorrow, after Sir Roderick's trial begins, I will issue your official pardon and restore your family's honor. Marcus bowed as deeply as he could. Your Majesty, I am forever in your debt. You owe me nothing, the king replied. It is I who owe you a debt for the injustice you have suffered. The crown failed to protect an innocent man, and, for that, I am truly sorry. As Marcus was escorted from the throne room, he felt as if he was walking in a dream. The nightmare that had consumed his life for months was finally ending. Soon he would see his family again, hold his sister, and tell her that everything was going to be all right. But, even as joy filled his heart, Marcus knew that the scars left by this ordeal would take a long time to heal. Trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. And, the man responsible for it all, Sir Roderick, had not yet faced justice for his crimes. The journey to his family's home seemed to take forever, even though it was only a short ride through the city. Marcus's hands shook with nervousness and anticipation as they approached the modest house where he had grown up. The building looked smaller and shabbier than he remembered, and he realized that his family's financial struggles had forced them to neglect basic maintenance. Captain Garrett dismounted from his horse and walked to the front door. He knocked firmly but politely, his manner much gentler than it had been earlier in the day. Marcus's mother opened the door, her face showing the toll that months of worry had taken on her. Her hair, once a rich brown, was now streaked with gray. Her eyes were red from crying, and her face was thin from poor appetite. But, when she saw Marcus standing there, her expression transformed completely. Marcus, she cried, rushing forward to embrace her son. Oh, my dear boy, is it really you? Marcus held his mother tightly, feeling her tears soaking into his shirt. It's me, Mother. I'm all right. Everything is going to be all right. From inside the house came the sound of running footsteps, and Elena appeared in the doorway. She was pale and thin, but her eyes lit up with joy when she saw her brother. Marcus, she shouted, throwing herself into his arms. I knew you would come back. I knew you were innocent. Marcus lifted his sister and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. She felt so light in his arms, much lighter than she should have, and he could see the illness that the king had mentioned. Have you been taking care of yourself, little one? He asked gently.
I've been waiting for you to come home and tell me more stories, Elena replied, her voice weak but full of happiness.
The ones about brave knights and magical kingdoms.
I have so many new stories to tell you, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Stories about truth winning over lies, and good people helping to fight injustice. Their father appeared in the doorway, his face showing disbelief and hope in equal measure.
Thomas Thornfield had aged years in the months since Marcus's arrest.
His business had been destroyed, his reputation ruined, and his son condemned as a traitor. But now, seeing Marcus free and smiling, the man began to weep openly. Son, he said simply, opening his arms. Marcus set Elena down and embraced his father, feeling the man's strength and love surrounding him.
I'm sorry, Father.
I'm sorry for all the pain my situation has caused. You have nothing to be sorry for, Thomas replied firmly.
You are innocent, and now everyone will know it. Captain Garrett cleared his throat politely. I must remind you that we have only 2 hours.
His Majesty expects the prisoner returned to the castle by sunset.
Prisoner? Elena asked, her face clouding with confusion. But Marcus is home now. Marcus knelt down to his sister's level.
I'm still officially a prisoner until tomorrow, little one. But the king believes my story now.
Tomorrow, I will be completely free. Elena nodded solemnly. And the bad man who lied about you? Will he be punished?
Yes, Marcus said confidently. The bad man will face justice for his crimes. They spent the next 2 hours talking, crying, and holding each other close. Marcus told his family about his escape from the castle, his weeks hiding in the city, and his confrontation with Captain Garrett. His parents shared their struggles with losing their business and dealing with the shame of having a son accused of treason. But, most importantly, they talked about the future. About rebuilding their lives, restoring their reputation, and moving forward together as a family. Marcus promised Elena that he would never leave them again, and she made him promise to always tell her the truth, no matter how scary it might be. When Captain Garrett announced that it was time to return to the castle, the farewell was difficult but not heartbreaking. They all knew that this separation was temporary, and that tomorrow would bring freedom and vindication. As they rode back through the streets of Valenhall, Marcus felt a peace he had not known in months. His family was safe, his innocence was proven, and justice would soon be served. But he also felt a burning desire to see Sir Roderick face the consequences of his actions. The man who had destroyed so many lives with his greed and lies would finally answer for his crimes. And Marcus intended to be there to witness every moment of it. The great hall of Valenhall Castle had been transformed into a courtroom for Sir Roderick's trial. Rows of wooden benches filled the space, packed with nobles, merchants, and common folk who had come to witness justice being served. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the stone floor and illuminating the dust particles that danced in the air. Marcus sat in the front row, his hands folded in his lap as he watched the proceedings with intense focus. He had been officially pardoned by King Aldric at dawn, and his freedom felt both surreal and wonderful. But he would not truly feel at peace until Sir Roderick faced the consequences of his actions. At the front of the hall, a raised platform held the king's throne and several chairs for the royal justices who would oversee the trial. King Aldric himself presided over the proceedings, his face a mask of controlled anger and disappointment. To his right sat Lord Chancellor William, the kingdom's highest legal authority, and to his left was Master Frederick, the royal treasurer who had discovered the extent of the theft. The accused man sat in a simple wooden chair in the center of the platform, flanked by 2 guards. Sir Roderick looked older than Marcus remembered, his usually pristine appearance now disheveled and worn. His fine clothes were wrinkled from a night in the dungeons, and his silver hair hung limply around his face. But his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made him such a dangerous opponent. When Sir Roderick's gaze fell on Marcus, the fallen advisor's expression hardened with hatred and contempt. Marcus met that stare without flinching, knowing that the truth was finally on his side. Sir Roderick Blackwood, King Aldric began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed hall, you stand accused of theft from the royal treasury, conspiracy against the crown, and the false imprisonment of innocent citizens.
How do you answer these charges?
Sir Roderick rose to his feet slowly, his movements careful and dignified despite his circumstances. "Your Majesty," he said in his smooth, cultured voice, "I maintain my complete innocence of all charges. I have served the crown faithfully for 15 years, and I would never betray the trust you have placed in me." A murmur went through the crowd. Even knowing what they knew about his guilt, many people found it difficult to believe that such a respected man could be a criminal.
King Eldrick nodded grimly. "Lord Chancellor, please present the evidence against the accused."
Lord Chancellor William stood and opened a large leather folder.
"Your Majesty, the evidence is extensive and damning.
First, we have the testimony of Sir Edmund Hartwell, who has confessed to participating in the theft under Sir Roderick's direction." Sir Edmund was brought forward, his face pale with shame and fear. He had spent the night in the dungeons as well, but, unlike Sir Roderick, he seemed broken by the weight of his guilt. "Tell the court what you told His Majesty yesterday," Lord Chancellor William commanded. Sir Edmund's voice was barely audible as he repeated his confession. He described how Sir Roderick had recruited him and others to steal from the royal treasury, promising them that the theft would never be discovered. He explained how they had used Marcus's family warehouse to hide the stolen gold temporarily before moving it to more permanent locations. "And what was your role in framing Marcus Thornfield?" the Lord Chancellor asked. "I placed the marked gold in his warehouse," Sir Edmund admitted, his voice breaking. "Sir Roderick told me it was necessary to have someone to blame when the theft was discovered. He said the young man would only be exiled, but..." He looked at Marcus with tears in his eyes. "I know now that was a lie. I am deeply sorry for the pain I have caused." Sir Roderick listened to this testimony with an expression of calm disdain. When Sir Edmund finished speaking, the accused man shook his head sadly. "Your Majesty," Sir Roderick said, "this man is clearly lying to save his own life. He was the one who organized the theft, and now he seeks to blame me for his crimes. I am being made a scapegoat for his actions." The crowd stirred uneasily. Sir Roderick's words carried the ring of conviction, and his reputation for honesty made his defense seem plausible. Lord Chancellor William smiled grimly. "Perhaps the accused will find it harder to dismiss the documentary evidence we have discovered." He gestured to a guard, who brought forward the wooden chest Marcus had seen the day before. The Lord Chancellor opened it and removed several dozen pieces of parchment. "These documents were found hidden in Sir Roderick's private chambers," he announced. "They detail every theft from the royal treasury over the past 18 months, including dates, amounts, and the names of those who participated." He held up one of the documents for the court to see. "This particular record shows a theft of 500 gold pieces on the 15th day of last month. The notation reads RB supervised removal, EH and TM transported goods to warehouse 3. RB refers to Roderick Blackwood, EH to Edmund Hartwell, and TM to Thomas Marlowe, another of the conspirators." Sir Roderick's face remained impassive, but Marcus could see the first signs of uncertainty in his eyes. "Those documents could have been forged," he said calmly. "Anyone with knowledge of the thefts could have created false evidence to implicate me." "Indeed," the Lord Chancellor agreed. "That is why we also have this." He produced a small piece of parchment with an official seal. "This is a requisition order for access to the royal treasury, signed by you and dated 3 days before the theft I just described. The signature has been verified by 3 different experts as authentic." The evidence was mounting, and Marcus could see that even Sir Roderick's supporters in the crowd were beginning to look doubtful. But the fallen advisor was not ready to give up. "Your Majesty," Sir Roderick said, addressing the king directly, "I have served you faithfully since you took the throne. I have advised you through wars and famines, through times of plenty and times of hardship. Does 15 years of loyal service mean nothing in the face of forged documents and the desperate lies of condemned criminals?" King Eldrick's expression was pained. Marcus could see how difficult this was for the monarch, who had trusted Sir Roderick completely. But the king's duty to justice was stronger than his personal feelings. 15 years of service mean a great deal," the king replied slowly. "Which is why your betrayal cuts so deeply. But the evidence against you is overwhelming." Master Frederick, the royal treasurer, stood to present his portion of the case. Your Majesty, my investigation has revealed that over 3,000 gold pieces have been stolen from the royal treasury. The thefts were carried out systematically over many months, using Sir Roderick's access and authority to avoid detection.
He unrolled a large parchment showing the treasury's inventory records.
The missing gold was replaced with lead pieces bearing false stamps, designed to fool casual inspection. Only Sir Roderick had the knowledge and access necessary to carry out such an elaborate deception. Sir Roderick's mask of calm finally began to crack. "This is madness," he exclaimed, rising from his chair.
"You are all conspiring against me. Someone is orchestrating this entire charade to destroy me. Who would have such power?" King Aldrich asked coldly. "Who could force Sir Edmund to confess falsely? Who could create months of forged documents? Who could plant evidence in your own private chambers?"
Sir Roderick looked around the room desperately, but found no friendly faces among the crowd. Even his former allies had turned away from him, unwilling to be associated with his disgrace.
He began, then stopped.
For the first time, he seemed to realize that his position was hopeless. King Aldrich gestured to the guards.
"Bring in the final witness." Marcus was surprised to see a hooded figure escorted into the hall.
When the hood was removed, gasps echoed through the crowd.
It was Thomas Marlowe, the second man Marcus had overheard in the warehouse that fateful night. Unlike Sir Edmund, Thomas Marlowe was a hardened criminal who showed no remorse for his actions.
He swaggered to the front of the platform and grinned at the shocked crowd.
"Your Majesty," he said with mock respect, "I understand you want to know about our little enterprise."
"Tell the court about Sir Roderick's role in the thefts," Lord Chancellor William commanded.
Thomas laughed harshly. "Sir Roderick?
He was the mastermind, the one who planned everything.
None of us could have pulled off something this big without him.
He knew exactly when the treasury would be unguarded, exactly which gold pieces to take, exactly how to cover our tracks." Sir Roderick's face had gone pale.
"You're lying. I never worked with criminals like you."
"Oh, but you did," Thomas replied with evident pleasure.
"You came to me personally when you needed someone who could move stolen goods without asking questions.
You promised us all rich rewards if we kept quiet and followed your orders exactly." He pointed directly at Sir Roderick. "You told us that if we ever got caught, we should say we were working for the Thornfield boy.
You had it all planned out from the beginning. The evidence was complete and devastating."
Sir Roderick looked around the room one more time, his eyes wild with desperation, but there was nowhere left to run and no more lies to tell. King Aldrich stood from his throne, his face heavy with sadness and determination.
"Sir Roderick Blackwood, the evidence against you is overwhelming and irrefutable. Do you have anything to say before I pronounce sentence?"
Sir Roderick straightened his shoulders and looked directly at the king.
For a moment, his old dignity returned. "Your Majesty, I have devoted my life to serving the crown.
If I have failed in that service, if I have allowed temptation to corrupt my judgment, then I accept the consequences of my actions." It was not quite a confession, but it was close enough.
The crowd was silent as King Aldrich prepared to deliver justice.
"Sir Roderick Blackwood," the king announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "you are found guilty of theft from the royal treasury, conspiracy against the crown, and the false imprisonment of innocent citizens. These crimes carry the penalty of death." Sir Roderick closed his eyes, accepting his fate with the same composure he had shown throughout his career. However, the king continued, "In consideration of your years of faithful service before these crimes, I commute your sentence to life imprisonment. You will be confined to the fortress prison on Raven's Island, where you will remain until your natural death." Marcus felt a mixture of satisfaction and relief. Justice had been served, but without the unnecessary brutality of an execution. Sir Roderick would spend the rest of his life paying for his crimes, but he would have time to reflect on his actions and perhaps find some measure of redemption. King Aldrich turned his attention to Marcus, who stood respectfully as the monarch addressed him. "Marcus Thornfield," the king said, his voice warm with genuine emotion, "you have suffered greatly for crimes you did not commit. The crown has failed you, and, for that, I am deeply sorry. Your name is hereby cleared of all charges, and your family's honor is fully restored." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as the weight of months of fear and despair finally lifted from his shoulders. Furthermore, the king continued, "As compensation for the injustice you have endured, I hereby grant your family a royal charter to establish a new trading company, with exclusive rights to import goods from the eastern kingdoms. May this help you rebuild what was lost." Marcus bowed deeply, overwhelmed by the king's generosity. "Your Majesty, you honor us beyond our deserving." "Justice and generosity are the foundations of good rulership," King Aldrich replied. "It is my duty to ensure that both are served." As the formal proceedings concluded, Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. Many people who had shunned his family during the trial now sought to congratulate him on his vindication. He accepted their words graciously, but his heart was focused on getting home to his family. Captain Garrett approached him as the crowd began to disperse. "Marcus," he said formally, "I owe you an apology. I was too quick to believe the evidence against you, and I nearly helped execute an innocent man." Marcus looked at the captain with respect and understanding. "You were doing your duty as you understood it, Captain. There is no shame in that." "You are generous in your forgiveness," Captain Garrett replied. "I hope you will accept my friendship as well as my apology." Marcus smiled and extended his hand. "I would be honored to call you friend, Captain." As Marcus finally left the castle, walking freely through the gates for the first time in months, he felt as if he was seeing the world with new eyes. The sun seemed brighter, the air fresher, and the future full of endless possibilities. He ran through the streets of Valenhall, eager to share the news with his family. People he passed recognized him from the trial and called out congratulations, but Marcus barely heard them. All he could think about was seeing Elena's face when he told her that the nightmare was finally over. When he reached his family's home, he burst through the door without knocking. Elena was sitting by the window, reading a book of fairy tales, but she looked up when he entered. "Marcus," she cried, jumping to her feet. "What happened? Tell me everything." Marcus lifted his sister and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. "It's over, little one. Sir Roderick has been found guilty, and I am completely free. We can start rebuilding our lives." Their parents rushed in from the kitchen, their faces bright with hope and happiness. Thomas embraced his son while Sarah wept tears of joy. "The king has given us a royal charter for a new trading company," Marcus announced. "We can rebuild our business, bigger and better than before." Elena tugged on his sleeve. "Does this mean you'll be home every night to tell me stories?" Marcus laughed and hugged her tightly. "Every single night, I promise. And we'll have many new adventures to share." That evening, as the family sat together around their dinner table for the first time in months, Marcus told Elena a new story. It was the tale of a young man who faced terrible injustice but never lost hope, who found allies in unexpected places, and who learned that truth and courage could overcome even the most powerful lies. "And they all lived happily ever after?" Elena asked as the story concluded. Marcus looked around at his family, whole and together once more, and smiled. "Yes, little one. They all lived happily ever after." Outside their window, the stars shone brightly over Valenhall, and the kingdom slept peacefully under the protection of justice restored. The fugitive who had challenged a royal guard had proven that sometimes, the most unbelievable moments are when truth finally triumphs over deception, and hope conquers despair.